And the locale was moved from the south to New England, and I'm convinced they'd have gone up to Alaska or the North Pole if...
The Twilight Zone was never just a television show, it was a warning disguised as entertainment. Behind one of America's most beloved shows, something happened that the network wanted buried. A single episode triggered outrage, protest letters, private panic inside CBS, and a decision so extreme that the episode vanished from American television for more than half a century. Most viewers had no idea it even existed. But after 50 years in the shadows, the banned episode suddenly resurfaced, giving audiences their first real glimpse at the scene CBS had quietly erased. And what they discovered was far more disturbing than anyone expected. The making of the Twilight Zone. In the late 1950s, Rod Serling was already one of the most respected television writers in America. He had won Emmy Awards for his serious dramas, and networks trusted him to deliver quality programming. But there was a problem. Every time Serling tried to write about important issues like war, racism, and political corruption, the network censors stepped in. They cut his lines, softened his characters, and told him that certain subjects were too dangerous for television. Serling grew frustrated. He needed a way to tell the truth without the censors realizing what he was doing. That need gave birth to The Twilight Zone, a show that would become one of the most beloved and influential series in television history. But the making of the show was not easy. The budget was tight, the schedule was brutal, and the network never really believed in it. And one scene in particular would get the show pulled off the air for 16 days. The idea for The Twilight Zone came out of Serling's anger. In 1957, he wrote a teleplay called The Arena about the Battle of the Bulge. CBS demanded that he remove references to American military incompetence and soften the portrayal of commanders who had made terrible mistakes. Serling refused at first, but then gave in. However, he was furious. He realized that if he wanted to write about serious subjects, he would have to hide them inside stories that did not look like they were about anything at all. Science fiction became his disguise. The aliens and monsters and parallel universes were not just entertainment. They were used as camouflage. The first pilot he submitted was called The Time Element, but CBS rejected it. The second pilot, Where Is Everybody?, aired on March 6, 1959, and told the story of a man alone in a town with no people. The episode was a metaphor for the loneliness of the nuclear age, a time when Americans lived in fear of war. Over the course of 5 seasons, Serling personally wrote 92 of the 156 episodes. That is nearly 60% of the entire series. No other writer came close. The workload was crushing, but Serling believed that the show could not succeed without his voice. He famously described The Twilight Zone as caviar compared to the mashed potatoes of standard television. He told interviewers that he expected the show to be canceled after 1 season because it was too intellectual for mass audiences. He was wrong about the cancellation, but he was right about everything else. The show aired on CBS, the same network that would later pull one of its episodes from syndication. The original run began on October 2, 1959, and ended on June 19, 1964. 4 years and 8 months of continuous production. The first 3 seasons were half-hour episodes. The 4th season experimented with hour-long episodes, which cost CBS significantly more money and required Serling to double his writing output. Viewership dropped 15% because audiences found the longer stories too slow, and the network had to go back to half-hour episodes for the 5th and final season. Serling produced the show through his own company, Cayuga Productions, named after the lake near his alma mater, Ithaca College. The budget per episode was approximately $65,000 by the final season. Adjusted for inflation, That is about $600,000 in 2025 dollars. It was a low budget even by 1960s standards. Gunsmoke, by comparison, cost $85,000 per episode. The tight budget meant that Serling had to be creative. He reused sets, doubled up actors, and wrote around expensive special effects. The shooting schedule was even tighter. Each episode was filmed in 3 to 4 days, an extremely rushed pace that left no room for error. Serling complained publicly that you could not make art on a schedule that would break a horse. But he did it anyway. He had no choice. One of the most remarkable things about The Twilight Zone was Serling's commitment to colorblind casting. He insisted on casting black actors like Ivan Dixon and Eartha Kitt, and Asian actors like George Takei, in roles that did not specify race. That was virtually unheard of in early 1960s television. Serling did not make a big deal about it. He just did it, and the network did not object. The series premiered on October 2, 1959. The New York Times called it imaginative but uneven, and predicted that the show would not last a full season. Variety called it too weird for mainstream America. The first episode drew 11 million viewers, which was respectable, but not a hit. CBS considered canceling after just 6 episodes, but the show found its audience. By the second season, ratings had climbed to 15 million weekly viewers. By the third season, The Twilight Zone was consistently ranking in the top 25 shows on American television. The show won 3 Primetime Emmy Awards during its original run and received 8 nominations across its 5 seasons. In 1961, it won the Unity Award for Outstanding Contributions to Better Race Relations, a rare honor for a commercial television program. By 1964, the phrase Twilight Zone had entered the English language as a common noun meaning a surreal or unsettling state of mind. After the show was canceled in 1964, it entered perpetual syndication and has never left American television ever since. It is one of the most rerun shows in history, beloved by generations of fans. But behind the scenes, the production was plagued by challenges that almost ruined it. And one episode in particular caused so much controversy that CBS pulled it off the air for 16 days. The challenges that almost ruined the show. Rod Serling had created something special, but making it work was a daily battle. The Twilight Zone was always one step away from disaster. The budget was too small, the schedule was too tight, and the network was always looking for reasons to shut it down. Serling fought for every episode, every script, and every moment of screen time. He lost some battles and won others, but the war never ended. One of the major challenges that almost destroyed the show was financial pressure, and it began with the film stock. Many episodes of the show were shot on 16mm film, instead of the more expensive 35mm. The cheaper film stock saved money, but it also produced grainy images that modern restorations still struggle to fix. The show looked cheap because it was cheap. Serling knew this, but he had no choice. The network would not give him more money, and he was already spending every dollar as carefully as he could. The special effects were even more problematic. The Twilight Zone had no dedicated visual effects team. Serling's production manager, a man named Buck Houghton, handled effects using whatever he could find. He used stock footage, matte paintings, and practical illusions. Nothing was off-limits. The results were often visible to anyone paying attention. Wires dangled from floating objects. Cardboard sets wobbled when actors leaned against them. Rear projection scenes looked obviously fake, with actors standing in front of backgrounds that did not move naturally. Fans forgave these flaws because the stories were so good, but Serling was embarrassed by them. One incident in particular became legendary among the crew. The Season 2 episode called The Howling Man required a transformation effect. The crew used a mannequin painted to look like the actor, but during the final take, the dummy's arm visibly broke on camera. Everyone saw it, and the shot was ruined. But CBS refused to pay for a reshoot. The episode aired with the broken arm, and Serling had to hope that viewers would not notice. The physical dangers of production were real as well. On March 2, 1962, a small fire broke out on Soundstage 3 at the studio during filming. Thankfully, no one was injured, but the fire destroyed $15,000 worth of props. That is approximately $150,000 in today's money. The loss was devastating for a production already operating on a shoestring budget. Behind the scenes, the personal struggles of the cast and crew added another layer of difficulty to the production. Serling himself was haunted by his service in World War II. He had been a paratrooper in the Philippines, and the things he had seen there never left him. He suffered from severe nightmares and insomnia his entire adult life. He would often wake up screaming, and his wife Carol reportedly slept in a separate bedroom for years. The man who wrote about fear understood it better than most, because he lived with it every day. He also smoked constantly, sometimes going through 4 to 5 packs of cigarettes a day. His fingers were yellowed, and his voice had become permanently raspy. He died of a heart attack at 50, and the damage to his heart and arteries showed just how heavily years of smoking had affected his health. Despite creating one of the most famous television shows in history, Serling was not wealthy during production. In 1960, he sold the rights to the Twilight Zone to CBS for $100,000 because he needed immediate cash. He later called this the dumbest business decision of his life. The show generated millions in syndication royalties, and Serling saw none of it. His marriage suffered under the weight of his obsession. His wife Carol later revealed that during the 3rd season, Serling was so consumed by writing that he would lock himself in his study for 16 hours straight. He would not speak to her or their 2 daughters for days at a time. The man who wrote about human connection was isolating himself from the people who loved him most. But it wasn't just Serling. The actors also brought their own struggles to the set. 2 guest stars died during or immediately after filming episodes. Ed Wynn, who starred in a Season 2 episode called One for the Angels, was already ill with throat cancer during filming. He performed while in pain, smiling through the discomfort because that was what professionals did. Thomas Gomez, who starred in a Season 3 episode called The Hunt, died of a heart attack in 1971. His final episode aired posthumously. George Takei, who would later become famous on Star Trek, revealed years after filming The Encounter that the experience had triggered painful memories of his childhood internment at Camp Rower. He had not discussed his internment publicly before 1964, and the episode forced him to confront his trauma on set. The experience stayed with him for the rest of his life. Neville Brand, another actor who appeared on the show, carried shrapnel in his left leg from a wound he received during the war. He walked with a visible limp, which the writers incorporated into his character as a war wound. The line between the actor and the role was blurred in ways that the audience never knew. The network also made Serling's life difficult. A Season 5 episode called Living Doll, featuring a talking doll named Talkie Tina, was briefly delayed because CBS executives feared it would cause children to destroy their own dolls. Serling threatened to quit, and the episode aired as written. But the fight took something out of him. Another episode called The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street almost did not air as intended either. CBS demanded that Serling remove the word communist from the final monologue. Serling refused, and the episode aired uncut. But CBS blacklisted him from network meetings for 3 months. He was being punished for standing up for his work. The racial politics of the era also caused problems. An episode called I Am the Night, Color Me Black, which directly addressed American racism, required 7 script revisions before the network would approve it. Serling told a reporter that he felt sick after agreeing to the changes. The show that was supposed to bypass censorship was being strangled by it. The sponsors were no better. General Foods, the show's primary advertiser, regularly demanded script changes. In one instance, they forced the removal of a scene showing a character eating a competitor's cereal. The brand was fictional, but General Foods did not want to take any chances. Serling complied, but he was furious. In 1962, after an episode called The Shelter, which dealt with sensitive issues, 3 regional advertisers pulled their commercials. They felt the show was too political. CBS replaced them within 2 weeks, but the message was clear. The network would always side with the people who paid the bills. William Tankersley, the head of CBS's censorship department, rejected 12-episode premises outright between 1959 and 1964. Despite the challenges, Serling kept working, kept fighting, and kept pushing against the limits that the network placed on him. The censorship battles and budget struggles were exhausting, but they were nothing compared to the scandals and controversies that would follow. The controversies that plagued the show. One of the most painful controversies surrounding the show involved Charles Beaumont, a prolific writer who was credited with 22 episodes of The Twilight Zone. Only Serling himself wrote more. Beaumont had given the show some of its most memorable stories, including The Howling Man, The New Exhibit, and Long Distance Call. He was young and talented, and Serling trusted him. But then, something shocking happened. In 1963, an author named James Blish publicly accused Beaumont of plagiarizing his short story, Beep, for the Twilight Zone episode, The Little People. The similarities were hard to ignore. Beaumont denied it, but internal memos at CBS showed that executives were aware of the problem. Rather than fight the accusation in court, CBS paid Blish a private settlement of $5,000, approximately $50,000 today. Beaumont was never publicly named in the settlement. CBS took full responsibility, protecting their writer while quietly admitting that something had gone wrong. Beaumont's health was already failing by then. He was suffering from early-onset Alzheimer's disease, though at the time it was misdiagnosed as a mysterious neurological decline. His writing quality collapsed as his mind deteriorated. Serling had to ghostwrite Beaumont's final credited episode, Queen of the Nile, without telling the network. The secret stayed between them. Beaumont died in 1967 at the age of 38. Serling privately blamed Beaumont's death on the pressure of the business and later said that he should have forced him to see a real doctor sooner. Richard Matheson, another major writer for the show, brought his own set of problems. He wrote 16 episodes of The Twilight Zone, including the iconic Nightmare at 20,000 feet with William Shatner. His work was brilliant, and he knew it. In 1962, Matheson demanded writer residuals for reruns, a concept that did not exist in any television contract at the time. CBS refused, and Matheson threatened to quit the show. Serling had to personally negotiate a compromise. Matheson would receive a $1,000 bonus per episode for any episode that aired more than twice. Matheson accepted the deal, but he remained bitter. The bitterness never faded. Matheson later claimed that Serling took all the credit for episodes that Serling did not write. He refused to attend any Twilight Zone reunion events for the rest of his life. The man who had helped define the show's voice wanted nothing to do with its legacy. The legal troubles did not stop there. A freelance writer named Sterling Silverman sued Cayuga Productions and CBS in 1963, claiming that the episode The Hunt had plagiarized his script, The Magic Place. Both stories involved an old man, a dog, and heaven. Silverman sought $150,000 in damages. The court ruled in favor of CBS in 1965, noting that the similarities were generic and not specific. The case is still cited in entertainment law textbooks as an example of the difference between idea theft and copyright infringement. Racial controversies also plagued the show. In 1960, an episode called The Big Tall Wish starred Ivan Dixon as a black boxer. It was one of the first television dramas to feature a black lead in a non-servant role. CBS received 200 complaint letters from Southern viewers, calling the episode integration propaganda. Serling wrote back to every complaining viewer personally, telling them that the color of a man's skin had nothing to do with his character, and that if they found that offensive, they were the problem. But Serling was not always on the right side of these battles. In 1961, an episode called A Quality of Mercy, about American soldiers in the Philippines, was filmed with a predominantly white cast playing Filipino civilians. Yellowface, as it was called, was still common in Hollywood. Serling later called the decision a terrible mistake, but blamed the network for refusing to hire Asian actors. It was not his finest moment. In 1963, an episode called Death Ship originally featured a black astronaut to be played by Ivan Dixon. CBS demanded that the character be rewritten as white because Southern affiliates would drop the show. Serling complied, and he never forgave himself. The man who had fought so hard to tell the truth had been forced to compromise it. Another plagiarism accusation came from author Walter Tevis, who wrote The Hustler and the Color of Money. In 1961, Tevis accused the Twilight Zone of stealing the premise for the episode Escape Clause from his unpublished short story, The Ifth of Oof. Both stories involved a man who sells his soul for immortality and then tries to die and cannot. Tevis had submitted his story to CBS in 1958. The network paid him $7,500 and gave him a story consultant credit on 3 episodes. No lawsuit was ever filed. Through it all, Serling's war with the network censors never ended. He described his relationship with CBS's Standards and Practices Department as a daily artillery exchange. He told Time magazine in 1962 that the only thing he had learned was how to lose gracefully. In 1963, after CBS rejected his script for an episode called The Parallel 3 times, Serling did not write a new episode for 6 weeks. The production delay cost CBS $40,000. After the 5th season ended, Serling told a friend that he could not write another word for people who treated him like a child. The Twilight Zone was dead, he said, and he had killed it because he was tired of fighting. But the show was not dead yet. 1 episode remained, and it would cause more trouble than all the others combined. The controversy that got the Twilight Zone pulled off the air for 16 days was still waiting in the wings. The episode that was pulled off air. The final season of The Twilight Zone was already struggling. Ratings were down, Serling was exhausted, and the network was looking for any excuse to move on. Then came an episode that gave them exactly what they were looking for. It was called The Encounter, and it aired on May 1, 1964. Rod Serling did not write it. A man named Martin M. Goldsmith did. The director was Robert Butler, and the 2 actors were Neville Brand and a young George Takei, years before he became famous on Star Trek. The episode was set in an attic, in a small American town, in the present day of 1964. It was supposed to be a drama about war and guilt, and the things that haunt people long after the fighting stops. Instead, it became the most controversial episode in the history of the show. The story began simply enough. A young Japanese-American man named Arthur Takamori, played by George Takei, arrives at the home of a middle-aged white man named Fenton, played by Neville Brand. Fenton is a bitter World War II veteran who walks with a limp from a wound he received in the Pacific. He is immediately hostile, and he accuses Arthur of taking jobs from real Americans. Arthur remains polite, professional, and calm, and asks to be considered for yard work. Fenton leads Arthur into the attic to show him old war souvenirs. The attic is cluttered with uniforms, medals, photographs, and a mounted samurai sword displayed on the wall. Arthur notices that the sword's hilt bears Japanese characters. He translates the inscription for Fenton: "The sword will avenge me." The moment the words are spoken aloud, the attic door slams shut, and both men are trapped. The sword, it seems, has supernatural powers. Under pressure, Fenton confesses that he was not a war hero. He admits that he committed a war crime against the Japanese officer who owned the sword and then stole it as a trophy. The confession is painful, and the audience begins to see Fenton as a man haunted by a terrible act. But then the story takes a darker turn. Arthur reveals that his father, a Japanese American who worked at Pearl Harbor, secretly helped the Japanese military during the 1941 attack. Arthur says he spent his entire life haunted by his father's actions, and the confrontation between the two men quickly turns violent, ending in tragedy. The problem with this episode was not the quality of the writing or the acting. The problem was the story itself. There is zero historical evidence that any Japanese American aided the Pearl Harbor attack. The accusation was a lie, a piece of propaganda that had been used to justify the imprisonment of 120,000 Japanese Americans during the war. 2/3 of those people were American citizens who lost their homes, their businesses, and their freedoms, based on a fiction. And here was the Twilight Zone, repeating that fiction as if it were fact. By presenting Arthur's father as a traitor, the episode essentially validated the false propaganda that had hurt so many innocent people. George Takei himself had been one of them. He was 5 years old when his family was uprooted and imprisoned. The backlash was immediate. Within days of the broadcast, the Japanese American Citizens League, the largest Asian American civil rights organization in the country, sent formal protest letters to CBS. They demanded that the network immediately cease further broadcasts of the episode and issue a public apology for perpetuating the very lies that had hurt innocent Americans. The American Civil Liberties Union and several groups of Nisei veterans joined the protests. According to television historian Mark Scott Zicree, a CBS internal memo dated May 17, 1964, just 16 days after the episode aired, stated that the encounter was to be removed from all future rerun packages effective immediately, with no further explanation needed. No CBS executive ever publicly explained the decision. The episode had aired once, but it would not air again for 52 years. Rod Serling did not defend the episode, nor did he condemn it. He gave no interviews about the encounter for the remaining 11 years of his life. Historians interpret this as silent embarrassment. According to his widow, Carol, Rod told her privately that the episode had gotten away from him and that he should have read the script more carefully before they shot it. The ban was absolute. CBS removed the encounter from all syndication packages. It did not appear in the original rerun rotation from 1964 to 1985, nor in the cable syndication deals of the 1980s. Of all 156 original episodes, it is the only one withheld from American syndication for content reasons. The episode did air in Canada and several European markets during the 1960s and 70s, but the ban was specific to American television. Despite the television ban, the episode was never removed from home video. American viewers could watch it on disc or online for decades, but it never appeared on a scheduled broadcast. Then, on January 3, 2016, something changed. Sci-Fi, the network formerly known as the Sci-Fi Channel, had been running Twilight Zone marathons since the 1990s, always omitting The Encounter. That year, they announced that they would finally include it. A spokesperson told The Hollywood Reporter that after careful consideration, they believed the episode had historical value as an artifact of its time. They would air it unedited and allow viewers to judge for themselves. George Takei, now a social media icon with millions of followers, tweeted before the broadcast that the episode was problematic, but that hiding history did not help. He urged people to watch it, learn from it, and then demand better. The ban had lasted 52 years, 2 months, and 2 days. It was the longest broadcast ban in American television history for a single episode of a non-political series. George Takei himself had evolved over the years. At 27, he had defended the episode. In his 70s, he publicly apologized to the Japanese-American community for his role in it. He said he was wrong to defend it, that it was a mistake, and that he was sorry. He has since made his internment story his life's work, producing a Broadway musical about the camps and speaking out whenever the events of that era are forgotten or distorted. The Encounter remains a stain on the legacy of the Twilight Zone, a reminder that even the best intentions can go terribly wrong when history is ignored. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more updates.